Phil Red had a way of turning teammates into rivals. Bill Ivy found that out first, in 1968. He would not be the last. But Ivy's story is the one that matters most, because of how it started. That year, Yamaha made a simple agreement between its two British stars. Reed would fight for the 125cc title. Ivy would fight for the 250. Ivy kept his side of the deal. Reed eventually decided he would not. What happened next cost Ivy far more than a single race. He walked away from Grand Prix motorcycle racing. Then he came back, and less than a year later, he was dead. Reed kept racing for years after that. He kept winning. He lived to 83. So was Ivy just unlucky? One difficult partnership in a sport full of them? Or was there something about racing alongside Phil Reed that other riders, in other years, would end up discovering for themselves? To understand that, we have to go back to the man who kept his word first, Bill Ivy. Bill Ivy warned everyone what trust was supposed to look like. He just did not do it with words. He did it with a motorcycle, in front of a crowd, months before anyone even needed the warning. Here is what happened. Two British riders, one factory team left standing. Honda and Suzuki had just pulled out of the smaller classes, so Yamaha made a deal with its own two stars. A gentleman's agreement, people called it. Phil Reed would take the 125cc title. Bill Ivy would take the 250. Neither man would fight the other for it. Reed was the more experienced rider, sharp and ambitious, already a two-time former world champion. Ivy was younger, smaller, wilder on a bike, adored by the crowds who called him Little Bill. Keep them apart, and both men could come home champions. Ivy kept his word first. At the Isle of Man, riding the 125, he was already leading Red by around 2 minutes. He had just ridden the first lap ever recorded above 100 miles an hour on that class of machine. He could have won easily. Nobody would have blamed him for it. Instead, on the final lap, he slowed right down. He pulled up near spectators at the roadside and asked them, almost joking, who was winning. Then he let Reed come through to win. Reed crossed the line less than a minute ahead of him. That is the proof. Ivy did not just agree to the deal. He lived up to it, in public, even when it cost him a win he had already earned. Whatever Reed did next would be measured against that, and it was about to be tested at the next big race of the season, a place called Brno. The test came months later at Brno, and Reed failed it twice in a single afternoon. First, in the 125 race, Ivy fell in the wet at the Farina curve and dropped out, hurting his shin badly enough that it would slow him down for the rest of that day. Reed won unopposed. His championship was secured early, with 3 rounds still left on the calendar, exactly as the deal had promised. That should have been the end of it. Reed already had his 125 title, wrapped up cleanly. Ivy, even hurt, still had a real shot at the 250. Instead, a few hours later, the two of them lined up for the 250 race, and Reed had heard something. Ivy had been telling people around the paddock that he was going to beat Reed, deal or no deal. Reed turned to him on the grid. He told Ivy plainly, if Ivy thought he could beat him while they were still riding to team orders, he was going to have to race him for it instead. The lights went out. They raced. Red won. Ivy finished second, still carrying the injury from that morning. Remember what Ivy had done at the Isle of Man. He had a win in hand and gave it up, in public, to honor a deal. Red had just shown the opposite was also true. Given the exact same choice, on the exact same kind of grid, he took the win for himself instead. One quiet sentence, spoken seconds before the start, had just undone everything the Isle of Man had proven. And the 250 title war was not over, not yet. Reed won the next round, in Finland. Ivy answered back and won in Ulster. The championship stayed wide open, all the way to the very last race of that season, in Italy. Reed did not just win the race he broke his word for. He walked away with both championships. Ivy walked away with nothing at all. That is the part that gets lost in the numbers. Across the whole season, out of 9 races run so far, Ivy had won just as many as Reed, 5-4 in Ivy's favor going into the final round. He had done everything the deal asked of him, exactly as agreed, in public, at real cost to himself, and it still was not enough. At Monza, the season finale in Italy, Reed arrived not even at his best, struggling in qualifying. He fought back through the field, took the lead, and crossed the line almost 2 minutes clear of Ivy. That result tied the two men on points for the year, same number of wins, same number of second places. Under the rules, a tie like that came down to total time on track, added up across every race both men had finished that season. Reed's number was smaller. He kept the 125 title he was always going to win. And now he had the 250 as well, both championships, in the same season, with the same two riders, on the same two bikes. Ivy had proven, at the Isle of Man, exactly what honoring a deal looked like. Red had just proven what breaking one paid, and paid well. A few months later, Yamaha pulled out of Grand Prix racing altogether. Both riders lost their factory machines for the following season. It had nothing to do with Brno. It simply happened to land right after it, and it hit both men equally, whatever either of them had done that year. For Reed, that meant a quieter year, riding whatever privateer machinery he could find. For Ivy, it meant something bigger. He announced his retirement from motorcycle racing entirely and turned to Formula 2 instead, buying himself a Brabham and starting all over again on 4 wheels. Nobody forced that decision. There was no factory order this time, no team boss telling him what to do. He simply left. And he left with nothing to show for a season where, by the numbers, he had been the better rider all along. It looked, for good, like the end of Bill Ivy on 2 wheels. It was not. Not quite. Bill Ivy did not fade away after Brno. If anything, he got faster. He spent most of 1969 behind the wheel of a Formula 2 car, and by most accounts he was a natural. One report from that spring describes his performance in an F2 race at Thruxton as close to astonishing for someone so new to 4 wheels. But car racing did not pay the bills the way motorcycles did, not yet, and Jawa came looking for him with an offer he needed. Ride their new 350cc machine, a water-cooled 4-cylinder 2-stroke, and use the money to keep funding life on 4 wheels. The Jawa had a reputation. It seized engines the way other bikes changed gears. Ivy did not seem to care. The Yamahas had seized on him too, he said, so there was nothing to do but get on with it. At Hockenheim, in Germany, he finished second. Ahead of him was Giacomo Agostini, the biggest name in the sport, riding for the untouchable MV Agusta team. Then came the Dutch TT, at Assen. This was not supposed to be close. Agostini's MV was the class of the field that year, a 4-stroke triple against Ivy's 2-stroke 4-cylinder, years younger in development. And yet Ivy went with him, lap after lap, taking the lead more than once. For a while, on a bike from a small Czechoslovak factory, a rider who had walked away from Grand Prix racing less than a year earlier was beating the greatest champion of his generation, in front of a crowd that had come to watch Agostini win. The Jawa dropped a cylinder near the end. 3 instead of 4. Ivy lost the place, but still crossed the line second, ahead of everyone alive except Agostini himself. He was not washed up. He was not chasing a fading career for old time's sake. He was, on that day, one of the fastest men on earth, on a machine most teams would have thrown away. A few weeks later, Ivy wrote to the organizers of the East German Grand Prix, asking for start money to bring the Jawa to the Sachsenring. It was, in the end, a business letter about a race entry fee. Nobody involved treated it as anything more than that. Once there, during practice, Ivy went out on the 350. Accounts differ on exactly what he was doing in the moment it happened. Some describe him mid-lap, pushing hard through a fast section of the old street circuit. Others describe him coming back toward the pits, relaxed, his helmet resting loosely against the fuel tank. No source agrees on which. What everyone agrees on is this: the engine seized, on a 2-stroke without warning. That means the back wheel simply stops turning while the bike is still moving fast. Ivy was thrown from the machine. He suffered massive head injuries. He never regained consciousness. He died a short time later, at 26 years old. This was the rider who had proven, at the Isle of Man, exactly what honoring your word looked like. The rider red had outmaneuvered at Brno, then beaten again at Monza. The rider who had walked away from Grand Prix racing entirely, rather than watch it happen a second time. Gone, less than a year after he made that choice. In a sport he had already tried to leave behind, and had only just proven he could still conquer. Reed, that same season, kept racing. Bill Ivy never got the chance to warn anyone with words. He didn't need to. 5 years later, it happened again, to a bigger name than his. Reed kept racing. In 1971, on a Yamaha with no factory backing at all, he won the 250 world title anyway. Then, in 1973, MV Agusta signed him as teammate to Giacomo Agostini, 7-time world champion, the biggest name motorcycle racing had ever produced. Reed was brought in as the second rider, the supporting one. He did not accept that role. Partway through the season, Agostini injured his leg during testing. While he recovered, he spoke publicly about his own team and about his new teammate, and neither conversation was kind. By the end of the season, Reed had taken the 500cc title for himself. Agostini, for the first time in almost a decade, did not have it. He left MV Agusta before the year was out and signed with Yamaha instead. The two-stroke Yamahas were simply faster by then, and that was reason enough on its own. But it was not the only reason people close to the team pointed to. Nobody at MV Agusta had made a formal deal this time. There was no promise on paper to break. There did not need to be. Reed had already shown, once, exactly what a teammate could expect from him. Bill Ivy proved that first, at real cost to himself. Giacomo Agostini found it out 5 years later, and simply left rather than find out twice. That was the warning. It was never spoken out loud, it just kept coming true.